You're listening to the Reinvest Podcast, where each Tuesday we show business owners and entrepreneurs how to diversify into real estate by equipping you with the tools and tactics to build generational wealth. Your hosts, Garrett Gatton and Seth Ciminillo. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. Very exciting episode for us to break down for you all. This is going to be relevant to our episode, but I do want to highlight this. If you don't know, Biggerpockets is a great resource, as probably most people listening to this channel do. And this will be kind of a soft tee up for our guest today. This was back in the summertime. I had a property that we had under contract, and I was looking for different strategies on what to do with that property. And one of the big key components that everybody considers in their strategy is financing. What kind of financing are you going to utilize? And that plays into the strategy, right? And at the time, we were looking at some DSCR loan products. We've talked about it in the show in the past, but we're going to expound upon that today because I think there's maybe a disconnect between that loan product and what strategies are relevant for using a DSCR loan. And there's not just one strategy, it's multiple strategies. So I was on Biggerpockets, and there's a lender tab that you can connect with different lenders. And today with us is Alex. Alex, I'm going to go for your name. Bekeza?
Pretty good. Bekiza.
Bekiza, potato, patata.
There's only two choices.
Hey. But I reached out to you, and within 5 minutes, I think we were having an email exchange about the property we were looking at. You were Johnny on the spot. And so now it's kind of created this opportunity to get into some of these strategies and your experience. So before we go any further, give us some context to how did you get into lending? How did you get to this point? What was your on-ramp to real estate investing? Give us a little background about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So before real estate, I was one of those guys who just was a workhorse in the restaurant industry. From the time I was 15, I got into the front of house and worked my way up the ladder to management, and had a chance to be a general manager at a pretty young age, like 22, 23. And in that industry, you're, no pun intended, spinning a lot of plates. It's a lot of multitasking, a lot of people problems, a lot of moving parts. That actually translated, I think, really nicely into real estate. And I got lucky because I had old high school buddies from the neighborhood who had taken off in the mortgage industry. I reconnected with them at a wedding. They said, dude, you would kill it. You got to come in. I blew them off. I thought, I'm not a real estate guy. I'm not a finance guy. And kind of found out how good of an opportunity it really was. So I went in, tried it out, and Biggerpockets was a essential tool for me just to get my bearings, right? I got on there just to kind of like get the bigger picture of real estate and real estate investing.
What year was this?
2017.
Okay.
Yeah. So it feels like a long time ago, but really not that long ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, I quickly realized I did not love working on conventional mortgages, especially like, first time home buyer stuff. It's a very emotional process. There's so much out of my control, right? DSCR, or like these business purpose loans, were really cool to me because it was much more matter of fact, numbers, either this works for them or it doesn't work, And anyway, so Biggerpockets, as I'm on there trying to develop a base of real estate knowledge, I identified that there's every day hundreds of people commenting things like, hey, my loan officer says I can't vest title in my LLC. What do I do? Or, hey, my loan officer says I can't cash out because I don't have enough seasoning, but I need to pay off my hard money lender that's only on a 6-month note. These things I would see all the time, and I would just chime in like, hey, have you looked into DSCR? Have you looked into DSCR? And now you'll see like space is kind of flooded with a lot of that. People have caught on to it. It's a great place to connect with borrowers. But anyway, I did that long enough, just chiming in with anecdotal advice over time. And yeah, it just led to a snowball effect because those are evergreen posts, when you,
right.
People can look back and say, hey, I saw you talking about this DSCR product 6 months ago. You still doing that? And absolutely. So anyway, as you can tell there, I quickly found myself trying to accommodate the burr investor. So I just always was looking for ways to make the process of getting that loan quoted, submitted, and funded as easy as possible for people trying to do that strategy.
So I think one of most people don't know this, but if you go under your Biggerpockets profile, you're the most reviewed loan officer on Biggerpockets.
Yeah, it's taken a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And,
dude, which if you don't know what Biggerpockets is, it is the largest investor to investor.
That's just hard to do.
That there is. I mean, it's kind of the mecca. And I know they've gone through a lot of change with, some different ownership, some different hosts for some of their big podcasts and stuff like that. But still, it's a great space if you are trying to learn or connect with others that are actually doing it. You can find people. Well, and you're from California.
Yeah, I live in Los Angeles.
We connected from Midwest Ohio to California with a click of a button, and here we are on a podcast. So.
It's kind of like an underrated superpower to say that you're the most reviewed loan officer in Biggerpockets. Like, it's like most people will be like, anybody else would be like, what does that even mean? But when inside the real estate investing community, you're like, that's hard work. You put a lot into that, which I think is really cool.
And to be honest, I put a lot of value on those reviews because I've intentionally sought them, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. When I have clients specifically who I've met on BP, or if I notice they're particularly active on BP, then I value it even more because, on Yelp, anyone can leave a Yelp. On Biggerpockets, someone leaves a review. You can go to their profile. You can see who else they've engaged with, what other topics they're in, what markets they invest in, and it's much more relatable.
Yeah.
So just give us a reference point. How many loans did you do last year?
Ooh, so my living in Los Angeles, my pipeline's kind of interesting, right? People say, why aren't you doing loans in the neighborhood? Man, every house around here is $2 million. Well, my business is really in servicing the rental investor in like the Midwest and South, or these cash flowing markets where DSCR loans are most viable, most attractive, or work at high LTV, right? So I tend to manage a big pipeline of small loans.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that I personally funded about 40 million last year.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I think that's against a lot of odds, right? It was a high rate environment. A lot of people were tepid, putting refis off, putting purchases off. A lot of people just put pencils down, you know?
I did.
So
the nice thing about DSCR loans is that if the number works, it just works. Like if it because it's not all the back and forth with getting stuff to the bank on your finances or waiting on W-2s or waiting on the tax returns. Now we're in new tax years. I mean, it's just kind of irrelevant. If the property works, it works. So that's what I love about real estate.
Wait, real quick. I have something. Yep. Alex, I too was in the restaurant industry. So you and we have a lot to relate about. Applebee's.
Listen, he was at Applebee's for 2 weeks.
Okay. no.
And he did not. And
6 weeks.
They did not ask him to come back
because I was climbing too fast, too high.
But I did resonate with your story. I did the same thing right out of high school, 17, worked for a restaurant, worked my way up to management. It was a great experience through my early 20s until I transitioned into the real estate realm as well. So.
My only point that I was trying to bring up is all three of us here on this recording, we're in the same boat, and we've all bled, and we feel the effects of that.
Don't believe him, Alex.
All right, we're moving on.
I think that's what Biggerpockets sort of like represents to me, is like the average American being given the tools to bootstrap themselves up to sky's the limit.
Yep.
Right.
Right.
All of us together from the ashes of the restaurant industry. So, hey, listen, I think this is one of the things, at least, and some of the clients from a real estate agent perspective that we encounter, or even some of the investor meetup that we host, there's a disconnect still, at least in our area, for people knowing how to use the DSCR loan, right? What's a property, a strategy that this, applies to? I think one of the most low-hanging obvious strategies is like BRRRR investing, right? Buy and hold type stuff. But we have some other strategies that we wanted to talk about that really the DSCR loan is perfect for implementing and executing that. So let's run through this. We got BRRRR investing, entity vesting, maybe coming out of a property that can't sell and you're trying to refi. Short-term rentals, some people didn't know that this DSCR loan can apply to that. Why don't you walk us through that?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, a lot to touch on there. So one thing too off the bat, I'll just clear before getting into the BRRRR stuff, is that DSCR loans are actually a great tool for turnkey investors too. I know there's a lot of folks out there who, make a lot of cash in there. Maybe it's a commission only job and they just want to park it somewhere in a rental, but they don't necessarily have the DTI to qualify, or maybe they do, but they want to vest title in an entity and their income situation is just complicated. They don't want to go through it. or quite frankly, sometimes DSCR might be even trading inside of Fannie and Freddie. And so anyway, can be used for turnkey purchases. If a property is leased or rent ready, you can go up to 80% LTV. These are 30-year fixed notes. And one cool thing about the DSCR environment lately in general is that these lenders are getting very aggressive on how they're calculating DSCR. A lot of people are expecting it to look like a local bank where they're, looking for a 1.25 and they're adding in all types of variables like vacancy, maintenance, utilities, things like that. In reality, we're really only looking at gross rents divided by PITI. And we're only looking for a 1.0. So literally it's just looking for a break-even property. And if I have it at break-even, really it's negative because I'm not counting things in the real world like management.
Right.
I don't care. So yeah, very viable for turnkey. And for Burr, my favorite subject, kind of what I'm more passionate about on my own personal investing side too. I just think it's a great way to, scale with as little skin in the game as possible. It's kind of one of the coolest ways to utilize financing. So the biggest problem Burr investors run into when looking for that takeout is seasoning. It used to be that conventional lenders only needed 6 months and that wasn't such a big deal. But in 2023, in spring 23, if you used purchase financing, like most people do, a hard money loan or any kind of front end financing, you would now need 12 months of title seasoning. Well, that kind of like just threw everything out because most of the time your financing on that Burr is a 1-year loan at best,
Yep.
So with DSCR loans, you'll find options with little to no seasoning. There's some products that market themselves as true no seasoning. I'd say right now I'm seeing the best rates and terms in a program that would just require 90 days. So what that looks like on our end is we're not going to make you wait until day 91 to sign a loan application. If you're one of those like fast-paced Burr investors who's more or less doing this full time, cosmetic rehab getting done in 45 days, a lot of those guys are shooting me a text saying, hey, need an appraisal on this one. And we're off to the races, right? We're going to try to knock out all that legwork, like title, appraisal, coordinating other third-party stuff, so that we can actually fund the deal as close to that 91-day mark as possible.
Wow. Man, that's wild. Yeah, the whole seasoning thing definitely caused people to kind of hit the brakes, slow down. And that was a big factor, because to your point, we had a lot of local lenders that were very competitive on their loan products because of the seasoning period and how they were able to kind of be on par with some of those other alternative loans. And then that was one of those restrictions, right? Anytime, you see the rate environment we came into, a lot of those lending restrictions get tighter. You're seeing on the commercial side as well. So I think that's one of the appealing things about DSCR is it continues to give you that flexibility to operate. You said entity vesting. Somebody may not know that term, but they might be familiar with the concept. What is that?
Well, a lot of investors, see the benefits of anonymity. There's certain tax benefits, liability benefits to vesting title in some type of entity like a corporation or an LLC. Most common would be LLC, and then probably C corp or S corp.
When a lot of guys will do, they're familiar with like, hey, I can get 10 loans in my name, Fannie Freddie. And what you're saying is you can get the same fixed rate 30-year mortgage, but in an LLC. And it just kind of opens up maybe something they didn't know was possible.
Yeah, that's right. It certainly makes it a lot easier also to partner, right? Partnering up and not having to rely on either one of their personal financials necessarily, right? So even though we do allow LLC vesting, all DSCR loans will typically require some type of personal guarantee from at least one person who owns at least 25% of that entity. But even with that rule in mind, you can see how a lot of people could get very creative with partnerships, right? Maybe one guy has, his FICO's in the toilet, but he's the great deal maker. He's the great project manager, right? And then you have this other guy with the squeaky clean financials. They're an entity together. We rely on the one guy's credit and get the loan done.
Nice.
So even though DSCR loans don't look at income, I'm never going to ask you where you work unless I'm just curious and we're just chatting. I'm never going to verify employment or calculate DTI or anything like that. Um,
Why are
pardon me.
investors so hungry why are investors, being the people that are like funding DSCR loans, so hungry right now to do this stuff and loan at a 1-to-1 DSCR value? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that doesn't, if it's me, I'm like, yeah, if a property is never,
Because it does
break
seem,
even.
to your point, if someone's at a 1-on-1,
They're probably losing money.
They're losing money every month, so it seems risky. So yeah, these investors that are actually funding these DSCR loans, what's so appealing, or maybe historically over the last few years, has it just been so successful that they're all in, or what?
Yeah, you nailed it. It might sound, well, it is risky, right? Just at its face, but I don't want to compare it too much to the, no doc loan crisis pre Dodd-Frank, because there is a lot of guardrails on this now, right? FICO being one of them. So even though we're not looking at DTI, we are, pretty conservative on FICO, right? Most DSCR lenders don't really want to go below a 680. Once you start getting into that bucket, there's products available, but it starts getting pretty ugly on price and LTV and everything. And then the difference right now in rate for a 680 versus 780 FICO is probably 100 bips.
Wow.
So it's yeah.
Is 780 what gets you the highest, like most favorable rate?
Yeah, most lenders don't really have a bucket higher than 780 plus. That's usually where I see it. Just anything above this is top tier kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. Usually the
so-
buckets go about every 20 points. You'll have like 680, 699, 700, 719, and so on.
So when I was first introduced to DSCR loans, probably a few years ago, almost any lender I talked to about DSCR loans, you had to buy it in your personal name. That was like the hang up. So with this entity vesting, has something changed in the last few years where it's allowed people to do it in entities?
That's a good question.
Or is it just up to who's funding them, that whatever their rules are, or what's going on here? Have you heard of that?
Yeah. And so to touch on the last point too, like default rates, relatively speaking, on these are very low. Like the performance on these DSCR loans in the last few years is surprisingly great. And in terms of who's doing them and what's the appetite, a lot of the money that we're finding from this is not just from the big Blackstone hedge fund type of organizations, but also life insurance money. You have these organizations with so much liquidity that they're going to be able to take an approach that works really well for us, which is like a big forward commitment on lending, right? So the cool thing about working with the life insurance money is that the rates are more sticky. They're less sensitive to the day-to-day fluctuations of the 5 and 10 year treasuries.
Right.
But forgive me because I think I kind of just skipped over your last question.
No, I'm glad you explained that. I kind of jumped ahead. When I first heard about DSCR loans a few years ago, everyone said it had to be in your personal name. I mean, we've talked to multiple lenders that was the case. And then it seems like just recently, now people are allowed to put them in entities. Did something change in regulations or just with these investors, or what's
from a compliance standpoint? One thing DSCR lenders are always trying to do at the root of it is prove that what they're doing is a business purpose loan. In order to not be subject to Dodd-Frank regulations, they need to do everything they can to prove, one, it's not owner occupied, right? So I think, part of me just thinks like, hey, if these are all made to business entities, it makes it a lot easier to say like, this is a business loan.
Sure.
It also is going to exempt them from, certain things that come up like at a local level regarding like prepayment penalties. And that rule is going to apply to residential loans. So even though I'm doing a DSCR loan on a single family, it's not a residential loan in that use of the word residential.
Yeah, that flexibility though is helpful because I think a lot of people, when you invest, you get past that point of that comfort level of wanting properties in your personal name. You want shielded with that LLC. So I'm glad that that's a possibility.
What are your rates right now? I mean, if someone were to contact you and say, "Hey, I want a DSCR loan," in this single family house, and they had a good credit score. Let's just assume they had 700s. Where do you think they'd be at?
Yeah, so it's really fairly in line with where you're seeing Fannie and Freddie right now. Anywhere from the, if for good credit, anywhere, and depending on the LTV and exact scenario, anywhere from the high 6s to low 7s.
Jeez. I feel like you guys would be eating everybody else's lunch with these DSCR loans.
We are. No, but it really is. I mean, it's to me, like, I get clients all the time, and I never want to be steering someone into a product they don't need, especially if they qualify for something better. But I mean, I'll sit there and run it with them. You can log into my portal at one of these residential lenders, even though I don't originate loans for them, and we can look side by side. Man, we're beating Fannie and Freddie today, so you don't wait 6 months. Let's just do it now.
Yeah, especially if the rates are so comparable, and you're getting a 30-year on a product that you may not otherwise be able to get a 30-year on, just depending on what kind of, banking route you went. Yeah, it just seems like it makes so much sense.
Earlier, Garrett, you brought up something about investors trying to get their 10 residential loans, right? And what you were alluding to was that Freddie and Fannie and a lot of other like bank institutions will typically cap you at a certain number of financed properties. 10 is typically that upper limit. Well, if you're a BRRRR investor, that last R, the repeat, your whole goal is, I think all of our goals is to
keep doing it,
expand beyond 10 mortgages, right?
Yeah.
So that's the cool part about DSCR is there is actually no limit on the number of financed properties that you can own. Certain individual lenders might have like caps on the total dollar amount that one guy can personally guarantee, but the number is usually pretty high, like 10 million. And even, I kind of take the approach of like, hey, we get to that point, we'll find a different way.
We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. What a good problem to have. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So talk about short-term rentals as a DSCR loan strategy.
Yeah, that's become more and more popular, and the lending market has become more and more amenable to it, while trying to
because
mitigate.
That has been it's more of a seasoned strategy.
I think it's had a little bit more time in the saddle. You could say that there's more data to analyze now, and lenders just find ways to, hedge their bets a little bit on it, right? There's some that say, hey, we're friendly with short-term rentals, bring it on in as long as the long-term market rent debt covers. They'll say, we're fine with you entertaining this nightly rental strategy with our conservative underwriting saying that the appraiser's opinion of what a 12-month lease would be a satisfactory to cover this PITI. What a lender, doesn't want to do is get so leveraged up on a property that if they had to foreclose, like there's not even like if the rent couldn't cover it, right?
Yeah.
But then there's some that are more aggressive, right? They'll use some type of actual STR income approach, and maybe that's because you have a seasoned property with a year or two of operating history, P&L, so that it can analyze, and they'll give you credit for that. Maybe they'll meet you at exactly what you're bringing in, or they'll haircut it to meet you somewhere in the middle of that and the long-term market rent. There's others that will utilize this new, AirDNA, which is not a perfect system, but it's pretty awesome for how much data it's able to analyze and score your property and give a projection of rental income based on bed bath count and guest count. So yeah, there's a lot of unique ways people are doing that, and the people are pretty shocked to find out that they can refi into a DSCR loan on an Airbnb with zero history.
Right.
Yeah, we have products that'll simply want to see that it's furnished and it's been on. It's currently listed on Airbnb, even if that went up 5 minutes ago.
Wow, and
That's wild.
Do you typically see for the short-term rental like those interest rates are higher?
Yeah, so interest rate and fees in general, you can always think of it as like a give and take on risk. It's not going to be night and day, but it'll be a few bips. I'd say STR, maybe budget for a quarter higher than whatever you're expecting on a LTR.
And that's not that bad.
Nah.
And were you saying that when your company or you broker this out and you look for a DSCR loan product on a short-term rental, you guys look at the 12-month rental income as the conservative underwriting, or you'll use and recognize some of those rates?
I like to start there. I say, hey, how long have you been operating it? Because figure as a reflection of risk, right? The best product would probably be the one that's proven themselves, So I always start there. Majority of the time I'm asking that question, they don't have 12-month P&Ls.
Right.
So then I start asking questions about, hey, what do you think the appraiser would say the long-term market rent is here? Because now I'm trying to tease out, does the long-term market rent actually cover us here? And we just call this a vacant property and LTR type of DSCR product, better pricing. As I go down the line, I say, oh, that doesn't work. It's too low. This is in nice part of Florida, or it's in some vacation destination where doesn't rent to price isn't very good.
Discrepancy is greater. Yeah.
Then we start looking at the more risky but more creative approaches, right? Getting the appraiser to give us a short-term rental comp form or table, and determining the DSCR using some type of short-term rental income approach.
You've got options. I think that's the cool thing, right? Is you can have confidence that there's going to be something that works for someone's property. Yeah.
That short-term rental strategy kind of it just reminds me of how connected it is to something else we touched on earlier. Is this high interest rate environment has really thrown a wrench in the timelines and plans of a lot of flippers. This past year, I can't tell you how many calls I've gotten from people who intended to flip a property, and after 45 days in the market, they start kind of settling in and saying, hey, maybe I need to look at what putting long-term financing would be on this. Maybe because they have the property free and clear and they can't just stay like that forever, or maybe they have a ballooning note and they're going to have to kick the can down the road. The short-term rental approach can save a lot of those, especially in the higher end markets where you have that issue, rent to price wise.
Okay.
That's good.
That's awesome. We are going to move into our smaller pockets segment, Alex. So go ahead and tell us about one of your worst real estate deals. It could have been a deal that you actually did yourself. It could have been a loan that went wrong. Tell us what happened, and then most importantly, what did you learn from it?
Yeah, that's tough. There's definitely been some hairy situations out there. I'd say most of them spark from some type of overestimation or over optimism on the borrower side, and I've been in that boat myself.
What?
Where it's like it's very easy, especially when you're starting out in this business, to find one comp that was shiny and great, and now that's my ARV.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So I really am always encouraging borrowers, like, haircut whatever you think that ARV is, haircut whatever you think that monthly rent is, and kind of make the deal work that way first. Because I have unfortunately over the years seen newer investors get highly leveraged, turn around towards the end of a ballooning note, and not get the appraisal that they need that would be satisfactory to create a situation where you don't have to bring in a bunch of cash now. Even at 80%. This kind of happened to me, and it'll actually bleed into a bit of advice. Is I did a BRRRR in 2020. It was my first fourplex, and in St. Louis, I bought it for $157,000. It already had 2 units leased. The other 2 were totally torn up. So it's kind of cool because I was able to sort of debt service the hard money loan while doing a full renovation on the other 2. So long story short, if you can follow me here, 157-ish purchase. I put about 45 into it. I'm expecting an ARV at like 250, and I'll leave a little bit of cash, a few $1,000s in, if all goes as planned, but it'll be a pretty sweet BRRRR. So I get the 2 units renovated and leased. I go to get that appraisal. First one comes back, $185,000.
No.
That'll suck the oxygen out of the room.
And I owe like 170 with the hard money. I think I owed like 175 or something like that.
Yeah, you have like $200,000 in this thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm freaking out, wondering what I did wrong. But I didn't really do anything to prepare the appraiser with my expectations. Or I'm not saying you should steer them or anything, but
like a bottle of wine or something.
Yeah, I didn't wine and dine the guy.
You should have told him, hey, I completely remodeled 2 of these units, and here's all the work I did, and here's the paper, and here's the pictures.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm going to get to is like, I didn't know what to do. I worked with the lender that I was getting my own loan for many, many times, so they were cool enough they actually paid for my second appraisal because they believed me or whatever. I'm trying to show good faith. Get a second appraisal, haven't done anything different to the property. 1 week later, 260.
Wow.
So,
you're in the gosh. That's what a vast first appraisal should have been fired.
Appraisals are just all over the place.
Anybody
I can't tell you how many
stuff.
times that has happened. Man.
Yeah,
Jeez.
So that's why I just like to say, like, if you have the opportunity, or pay someone to help you with it if you don't want to put in the time or it's not your forte, to just create a little one pager on what you've done. You
Yeah.
don't you don't appraisers are going to be very sensitive to you insinuating any value. Matter of fact, if you do, they'll probably just decline the order because once that's happened officially, they have a compliance issue on their hands. So you don't want to insinuate a specific value, but there is no harm in saying, "Hey, I just wanted to share with you like an analysis of my project here," and that might include some before and after pictures, a little breakdown of your scope of work completed with a bottom line number of what you spent. Um,
Don't
and
insinuate
maybe
value, but insinuate how much money you have in it, and that your wife's going to be really upset if things don't go the right way.
yeah, exactly.
You sit there with the appraiser and you're like, if this doesn't work out,
My marriage is.
I'm gonna have to file bankruptcy. And they're like, oh my gosh.
You bring your kids out and you're like, these are cute kids, aren't they? You'd like for them to have a home. Yeah.
Oh man,
That's funny.
I'm failing to remember his name, but there's a comedian who does this kind of sales tactic like this on Instagram. It's so funny. Puts a gun to his head,
Yeah.
But no, I've had some. I don't know. It's been cordial when I've said stuff like, "Hey, I'm not trying to steer you one way or another. I just really wanted to show you something I worked up to give you an idea of where my head's at on this."
Yeah.
And
well, that was an easy thing that saved you thousands of dollars.
Yeah, it really could. It really could. You're just eliminate some unknowns,
Yeah.
or
That's a good
have
one,
that data ready. I mean, really, like I hate to say this, but like it's hard to take borrowers' emotions too seriously sometimes when they're very upset about appraisal, and then you go and ask like, "Hey, no problem. Let's do reconsideration of value on this. Can you just send me 3 comps that are better than the ones that were used in this report?" I mean, the answer better be yes,
Yeah, they're like, you know what? That happened to me on a property before. That exact situation, I'll tell myself. Me and some friends, we bought a property, and it was while things were hot, man. We were like, oh, man, we're going to buy this property with hard money. We're going to refinance it after 6 months because there was a seasoning period, so we bought it hard money, cash, you know what I mean? We were going to refinance it in 6 months, and we're like, we're going to get this thing rented out. We're probably going to pull out, have no money in the deal, have a nice cash flowing rental.
Practically printing money.
Yeah, we thought we were smart.
What it felt like back then.
Yeah, and so, but after we bought it, rate environment started to change. So literally in that 6 month period, the rate environment started to, shoot up. And so that was against us. And then the comps that we had originally picked out for this property, we got a little bit of a lesson in that. And we found out they weren't quite as comparable as we thought, just because some of the age discrepancies, and this was a very old home, and we kind of got our butts handed to us. And just similar to you, on the first appraisal, it was bad. I mean, we were like, man, we're going to have to come up with like, I don't know what it was, 15 or 20 grand that we did not want to come up with. And but then we asked for a second appraisal, met the appraiser out at the property, brought them a flyer, showed them the pictures, gave them all the updates, and we got the number we needed, and we were only out of pocket like $6,000 or something like that. But yeah, that was a good lesson.
Yeah, you can't take it for granted. It's gonna take a little extra work, just due diligence to make sure. I mean, you're lucky. I'm not local to the properties. When I find the borrower is local to the property, I really highly encourage them to meet them there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just because you're going to be able to point out in real time, like, yeah, we did this, we did that, and
yeah,
it's going to influence them.
Yep.
All right,
awesome.
man. We're going to go into what we call our little nugget. Sucker for the DJ music. This is one practical takeaway or piece of advice for our listeners that they can implement to their real estate investing business. Could be something very practical, could be fundamental to the way you operate your own business.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, besides, like we said, preparing yourself for an appraisal, I guess my practical advice is somewhat selfish. When I first started getting into this, I was copycatting other borrowers that I saw being successful, right? Why am I in St. Louis? Because I was lucky enough to have really active clients there. And I found myself with many, many, many appraisals in my Google Drive in 1 or 2 zip codes. So it helped me narrow things down. And then what I would do is look at similar properties listed for sale. And then what I'm leading up to is, most importantly, I would be logged into various lenders like internal portals that typically a borrower doesn't have access to, and I would just run numbers in there, and I would basically pick my deals based on how the lending worked on it, right? And so in like this is an idea that I've had for years now, but we finally started taking action on it last spring. And it's at the point where it's the front end of it, phase one, is totally functional and usable for a borrower. If you go into our site at investorpropertyloan.com/DSCR, I created this little widget where it's updated daily. I think this is a great pre-underwriting tool for either a BRRRR while you're in the middle of renovations, or maybe you haven't even closed yet. You're just trying to kind of like plan out your exit. You can, without giving me your name, number, email, no one's going to bug you. You're not submitting information and waiting to hear from us, sell you on anything. You can just punch in the numbers right here, a couple simple variables like, is it a cash out refi or a purchase? What's your FICO score? What's the monthly rent? What's the value? In case of a BRRRR, what's the ARV? And as soon as you punched in these couple of questions, immediately on the right, you're going to get dialed in max LTV, what today's rate is if you were to lock today, P&I payments, estimated PITI, estimated DSCR, exact lender fees. And so I just love that because it takes so much of the unknown out of it. Kind of gives the borrower the steering wheel a little bit. It's the complete opposite approach is what you'll see on just about any other lender's website, where it's like, get a quote. And you're like, okay, social security number.
Right. Yeah, give me your email and phone number. Get bombarded by emails.
Yeah, exactly. Then they'll say, we'll get back to you with pricing soon. And then you get bombarded with marketing and calls. And
Yeah, no. I'm looking at this widget right now on my laptop. We'll put this as a link in the show notes. So if you're listening to this and you want
that'd be helpful.
It is helpful because a lot of the underwriting tools are more on like the income side of things, and it's the lending variable that's kind of that paywall, of your information. And so you said exact closing costs, like.
So the only thing it's not going to predict is anything outside of the lender's control. Like, it's going to it is going to give you an exact origination fee and an exact processing fee. Wow. It's not going to necessarily give you what your title and escrow fees are, but we'll use any company that you like. So that's up to you. And then it's not going to include necessarily the proper like prepaid costs for taxes and insurance, just because that's TBD. But any lender related cost is going to display immediately.
Right. Very cool. I don't think I've ever seen a tool like that.
That's a great tool.
Cool. Hey, what's been one of the best resources in your business development? What's excelled your career kind of above any of the other things out there?
And this is hard as kind of a control freak type person, but kind of learning how to delegate certain tasks. I think our business really took off once we started incorporating more processing type roles within our company. Getting some younger entry level people in here who are really ambitious, hardworking, and trying to break into real estate, and getting them to take away some of the tasks from the originator. That's been big. And now in the last year or so, it's turned into more of like, how do I automate a lot of these tasks, right? So part of this tool that we've launched it's not just an awesome and attractive feature for a borrower. That's hopefully a lot of people just keep that as a tab on their phone at all times and just play with stuff at the middle of the night. You're not having to wait for the loan officer to wake up at 10 a.m. and give you a call back. You can get it live, right? So just constantly finding ways to take away tasks from yourself that are not the highest and best use of your time.
Yeah, that's good.
That's good stuff.
That's what we're learning too. We're learning a lot of that right now.
And you only learn that through pain. It's the constraint of your time and resources that's like, I can't keep getting further in the direction I want to go if I keep trying to do it all myself. Or you take on more capacity, then you need more people, to delegate to, and that's really good.
I'll also say saying no to more things. And so sorry. Saying no to more things is huge for me.
That's a good one too.
So our company is cool because we have a lot of different LOs who actually have different interests and passions. Like we have people here who they live and breathe that Fannie Freddie stuff. Excellent. If I get a borrower, even if it's one of my repeat clients who I've done 10 DSCR loans for, but really now they got to do something on their primary, excellent. Talk to this person. You're looking for SBA or, 5+ unit commercial stuff. Great. We got this guy. And so for me, like how I've scaled my business is kind of by being not a jack of all trades, but just annihilating that kind of cookie cutter LTR, DSCR loan situation.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The niches have the riches.
The riches are in the niches. Isn't that how it goes?
Well, but you got to think the riches are in the niches. So that's another way to say it. All right. Hey, how can people find out more about you and follow your success?
Yeah, I'd love for you to connect with me on Biggerpockets. I'm also on Instagram as Alex Bakiza, the Burr Lender. And if you're in the Los Angeles area, I also host a monthly real estate investor meetup in Woodland Hills. We'd love to have you.
That is awesome. I'll put those links in the show notes. Thank you for your time today and unfolding some of these things. Hopefully, if you listen to this, you have some more tools on your tool belt. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
As always, excited that you joined us for another episode of the Reinvest Podcast. If you want to learn how you can use your hard-earned capital to diversify into real estate, go to our website, reinvestcapital.us, and shoot us a message. Move farther, reach higher, and grow deeper.